a little bit interesting topic. So I know most of the people have talked about continuous testing, shift left, all these buzzwords, but I probably will do a little bit of double click on the continuous testing and let's see how it goes. Yep. So just to start with my introduction, I started my career 18 years ago and worked with companies like PayPal, Informatica, and currently I'm working with a company called Blue Talon, which is a big data startup. And we actually do data security on the Cloudera and Hortonworks kind of platforms. So I built automation. I started my career with Windrunner and UFT, and then Silk and Selenium. Selenium with .NET, also with Java and Cucumber, whatnot. So I built frameworks from the scratch, ground up multiple times. I built continuous integration multiple times from ground up in multiple organizations. So I'm an agile champion as well, so I'm an internal coach in most cases, in most of the companies that I worked in the recent past. So that's about me quickly. So moving on, what is continuous testing? So, most of us think I have a build. People do check-in and then we do a build once in a day, and I run my sanity test once a night. So my testing is continuous. That's what people think, most of the cases. But some people might have their unit test running for every check-in, which is good. But how many of you are doing a build and running functional or end-to-end tests or QE API automation tests for every build? That's a little challenging, right? You have too many things to do. It's a lot of tests that you have that cannot be run for every check-in. It's too much is what we think. But isn't it possible? Probably, yeah. So we so-called machine learning, we use a buzzword. So how about using code coverage tools to figure out for every test that I'm running, what are the components that are getting touched, and keep a track of that into your database or somewhere, and that's what is your data. So for every check-in, you know where the code is being checked in, and then you can figure out what tests that will impact this particular component. You can run those API tests for every single check-in. So it's still possible to run your QE automation tests for every single check-in, not just the unit testing. We always think the developers write the tests that are always passing. My tests are the ones that are going to fail. So there's an opportunity for you to make your tests to come into play for every single check-in. And if your tests are failing, you have to reject the check-in and then let him fix the bug. And you are enabling the fixing then and there, and then that is when you are allowing them to integrate into the mainstream. Isn't it more continuous testing than what you are traditionally doing, nightly build? I think it is. So, of course, it's not just about the unit tests and then the API. So your test environment you should also be able to build your test environments in different platforms. And I worked in product companies, enterprise software, where my product can be installed in multiple operating systems, can work on multiple databases, browsers, and whatnot. So if you have to test these many configurations, you are running once in blue moon at the time of regression cycle just before you are signing off, you are going to find a lot more bugs. So you have to have your test environments that can be built whenever you want and be able to run much more frequently than what you generally do in a release cycle. How can we move all these things up in the cycle towards the left so that we can get the quality much faster than what we do today? That's what is the key. Why do we need continuous testing, first of all? So day by day, the market demand is increasing. We want to deliver things much faster than what we do. So the testing cycles are shrinking, right? But the quality expectations are growing, right? And more rapid development architectures like microservices. So everybody develops things on their own, and there's everybody independently develops things and integrates at some point in time. So how can you make sure whatever you're developing is still working with other components or other services? That's where it becomes even more challenging. We have to make sure we are testing much more rapidly and faster, right? So that's another reason why you need continuous testing. Of course, for doing all these things, you definitely need to have high quality automated tests. That's when it is all possible, right? And you have to have right feedback, right time to the right stakeholders. That is when you can make progress much faster and deliver quality, right? And the sooner the feedback, of course, the lower the rework is going to be, right? You should be able to get the feedback at any point in time in your life cycle. It's not just at the end of the day. The sooner with continuous integration, we probably came to a day right? We are running the test overnight and then you are having feedback on the next day, but how can we shorten even that is what is all continuous testing is about. So at environment point of view, so it looks like it spans across the development life cycle till it goes to production. May not be actual testing, but then I'll probably talk about how continuous monitoring can help us to improve our quality and testing as well. So I'll talk about it a little bit in my upcoming slides. Some of the attributes, I mean, why are we doing continuous testing in first place? End of the day, you should be able to assess your business risk much faster, much sooner in your development life cycle. That's the key, right? And I mean, if you shift the quality left, the sooner you find the bugs, the release is going to be much more qualitative. You will not have surprise at the end of the release, or last minute bug and I have to push the release by another week or so. All these things will not be there if you're continuously, constantly running your tests and up in the cycle, right? Of course, we already talked about demands of release frequency, so we have to release much more faster. So automate as much as possible. People talked about doing performance testing part of your continuous integration, doing security testing part of your continuous integration. These are all much more important and evident going forward for you to release much better quality and then much faster, right? And your environment should also be available on demand. So I mean, if I have now with the help of this AWS, or you'll be able to have your images ready, be able to spin off any environment that you want. Even the Dockers can help you to create your environments much faster and on demand. So we have to leverage these technologies to be able to enable the continuous integration, continuous testing rather, right? And we should be able to get the feedback at every stage in our delivery pipeline. That's the key, basically. So people sometimes confuse, I have automation, so I'm doing continuous testing. So you have completed your coding, and you're waiting for developer to give the code, then you'll deploy, and then you run your automation. Then you click trigger to run your automation. That's not continuous testing. You probably would have done automation, but you're not putting them into action. You have to put them into action automatically without you interacting, without you touching anything. It should give you value out of it, right? So without you to wait, and when your code is being executed regularly, whenever it is required for every check-in, that is when it is actually called continuous testing. It's not just about having automation running nightly builds. I mean, nightly sanity is not what is continuous testing is all about. It's much more than that. So what do you need to do for implementing continuous testing? So you have to always constantly analyze your risks and mitigate them as well, right? Increase the velocity with you have to improve your engineering processes to be able to help the continuous testing. And people think, I don't need, I mean, with the current team, probably sometimes I'll be able to do it, but initially you actually have to spend a little bit more money or cost to be able to get there, right? So for example, you have a cheap, I mean, you want to do it in low cost and quick turnaround time, all you get is bugs. You'll not get any value out of it. If you want to do high quality at low cost, probably it'll take more time. And you want to do quick turnaround, high quality, then probably it will not be cost. You have to pay the buck for that. So you have to keep that in mind. So this will tell you, like, nothing is free. So there's no free lunch types. So you have to invest or wait for the time and then do qualitative work rather than being in hurry and then just saying for the sake of it. So I've implemented continuous integration and my sanity runs every day. I'm doing continuous testing. That's not what it is. So it has to be, I mean, I'll probably go next level information like what all we need to do in order to enable us to do continuous testing. So this kind of double click that I'm doing, probably if you haven't, I mean, you can go in detail in this, right? So, and people raise a bug and wait for them to be fixed. And I used to do a metric called average defect fixing time. It used to be, even for a blocker, it used to be a day or two, or any other bug, it will be 3 or 4 days. So what is the fun in raising a bug and just waiting for it, right? So if there's a blocker and you're waiting for a day, and then you are actually wasting time. So if you're fixing that particular bug much faster, and you're discussing with the developer, and they're fixing and enabling you to test further, and then find more bugs, that is what is more value than just raising a bug and waiting for it. So you have to discuss and make sure both the developer and QE are working together, fix them fast and test much faster, and test more is what is going to help you doing continuous testing, right? And of course, you have to have your test case management also optimized. So the test cases should should have quality and effectiveness. Like I have 10,000 test cases, but out of them like 3,000 are outdated. It's of no use. So you should always maintain your test case management tools as well and your test case as well, right? And of course, you have to have maximum coverage with less test cases. I mean, I'm running like 10,000 test cases every week or every sprint, but the value that I get out of it or the bugs that I find is very less, is of no use. You should always constantly check how many bugs that I'm able to find through your automation as well. So that's also a key metric that we should be looking at. So it's not the number that you are actually running, but the number of bugs that you are able to find by running these tests is also important. You should do probably some of the analytics that I was talking about. So by looking at where the code change has been done, and it will automatically identify what components that are getting impacted, what tests that I need to be running from my existing automation suite, and what are the new tests that I need to be building. All these things you should be able to figure out much faster. That is when you can enable the continuous testing as well. Of course, the regression as well. So you should be able to figure out automatically what regression tests that I should be running. So somebody shouldn't be using their judgment. Rather, it should be a technical or a tool that will be driving to tell us what test that needs to be run. That should tell me what to run rather than you deciding, okay, I assumed this may not impact, but I found a bug after running a test, right? That shouldn't be the case. So some of the key practices, environment access and availability, you should always have a production-like environment. So somebody talked about, I think Ashish talked about test data tools that we have. So I worked in a product called test data management. So you have your production data. You cannot use that production data straight into your QA environment because it has sensitive information. It has huge amount of data that you cannot use all of it in your test environments. So that's where you have tools like test data management tools like Informatica has one of them. So it does subsetting and masking. So basically you take the production data and subset it, get whatever the size you want to get it, and then you can mask the sensitive information and use it in your test environments. That can be done. So you have to use those kind of techniques, right? Service virtualization, I think even this was talked about. So you can't wait for other service to be ready, only then I do automation, then only then I put it into my continuous integration is not going to help. You have to make sure you have to use the mocking techniques and whatnot and do the automation much as and when your service is ready, and you should be able to mock the other services and put them into automation, put them into action. So you should also have health checks along with that. So it's not just running the test, pass or fail. So for example, we talked about it actually measures, like whenever you are running a UI test, it will actually measure how much time it has taken in UI, how much time it has taken in server. What if you have intelligence in your tool or in your framework, which will tell me, okay, last time this has taken 5 seconds, this time it is taking 7 seconds, raise an alarm saying, okay, it is actually, there's a degrade in the performance, right? So if you're able to do them in your part of your framework, part of your testing cycle, that will give you much more efficient results than what you are. It's not just about pass or fail. It also tells you performance statistics. It also tells you about CPU and memory statistics and things like that. You need not have really a performance test to figure out these things. Some of your UI automation frameworks with a little tooling and tweaking, you'll be able to figure out the performance bottlenecks as well. All you need to do is figure out and inject the right code at the right place in your framework. That's all you need to do. And what are the test strategies that we should be following? I mean, these are some of the aspects that will actually help you to do continuous testing. So you should streamline your test process, and your entire team should take responsibility. It's not just the QA team running around testing and development will take their own sweet time to fix the bugs. It's not going to help you continuous testing. So everybody should take the responsibility for it and increase the velocity and improve the quality, right? And test throughout the build and delivery pipeline. We talked about it, implementing automation testing. Of course, that's a key without which nothing can happen. Shift left, not just the functional testing, of course, non-functional testing also, how can we move up in the cycle, right? That's also a key thing. So continuous monitoring and in test as well as production. So how can that help continuous testing and improvement? We'll talk about it. A little bit intense content, but I'll just talk about some of the highlights here. So you have to, you always have this 80-20 concept, right? So customer will always use 20% of your features, and 80% of them will not be used at all, or very lightly used, right? So you have to figure out those critical paths and then focus more on them to find make sure the customer is happy mostly, right? And of course, you are optimizing the testing scope, test cases, and test suites should be optimized. We have to use, for example, we have to use realistic test data. So for that, you have to use synthetic data generation or your test data management tools kind of thing, and make sure you have a right test data for your testing as well, right? And we have to use exploratory testing. So, I mean, most of the time you raise a blocker and wait for 3 days, and your test coverage itself is not complete. You are trying to complete your test case pass fail by the end of the testing cycle. When do you really do your exploratory testing? So you will not have time. So if you, that is where the handshake is required between dev and QE. If they're fixing the bugs faster, you have enough time to test more, you have enough time to test your planned test cases, and then you spend time on your exploratory testing. That is when you can spend, you can find more bugs. So I mean, it's important to collaborate with development and QE as in the whole continuous testing process. So your test cases should be having a high, I mean, your coverage should be with high risk areas, customer-centric features, and critical workflows, business workflows. So you should make sure these are covered part of your testing cycle, right? So, and across multiple platforms as well. So this also key in enterprise software, where your application can be is supported in multiple platforms and databases and things like that. So the platforms play a crucial role. It's not just browsers and sometimes it's browsers and different devices and things like that, but in enterprise cases, it's different operating systems and different databases. So it depends on the context, so you have to make sure your application is exercised continuously every week or every sprint. It is, all your regressions are run on across the platforms as well. So that's also a key thing. Sorry. So you should run your tests in parallel. So how, I mean, I've seen most of the people run the tests, and my test takes about 3 days to run the entire suite. And that's not really giving you a value out of it. So how can you make your entire test atomic? How can you make them independent? How can you make them run in parallel? That's the key, right? So that's when you can get the value much faster than what it is. Today, infrastructure has become so cheap, but we have to leverage it and then make sure we are able to run things in parallel, much shorter time, and get value much more faster. So these are some of the key things. That every test should be independent. You should make sure your own test data is created by yourself and then cleaned by yourself, whatever is required. So don't wait for other tests to run. Then you cannot really achieve your parallelism, whatever you need in your test execution, right? So you have to make sure, identify your bottlenecks and mitigate them. So I mean, so testers are not included in the refinement, the backlog refinement, so you really don't know what is happening. You will not be able to define the acceptance criteria. You will wait for development to develop their feature, and then you know what exactly is developed. It's too late for you to get prepared for the automation or for continuous testing. So we have to be participating in all the rituals in your agile, and you understand the feature from the day one along with the developer. While he is writing the development code, the feature development, you have to be able to write your automation testing along in parallel, right, along with him. That's when you can make progress. So defects are not addressed timely. I think I talked about it much before. So I mean, regression suits take too long. I mean, again, you will not. That's where we talked about we should run in parallel, and we should get the feedback much faster and reduce the invalid failure. So in most of the cases in UI automation, that's what you see. I mean, my tests run, but then 100 of them fail. 70 of them are because page load time, pages didn't load on time. So that's where those are all invalid failures. So how can you reduce these invalid failures and make sure your automation is effective? How can you retry your test? How can you retry identifying your objects while you are building your automation framework? These are all key for your invalid failures rate to come down. So you always have to look at why the reasons for my automation failure. What's wrong with my scripts, my lab, or execution? I mean, in general, 80% of your issues will have a pattern. You should be able to identify those patterns, identify where we need to do improvement. Is it in part of my scripts or labs or execution? So you should make those continuous improvements part of in your platforms as well, in your automation as well. That is when you can achieve this and deliver quality out of it. This, I think most of us talked about. Everybody's slide has this. You have to have more unit tests, component tests are the next ones, and then the API automated end-to-end tests are the key, and then comes to UI automation, then of course manual and exploratory testing. So somebody was talking about how do I know what is the percentage I need to have for my automated tests or UI tests. So the more API tests that you are spending time on, in building, is what is the key, because it gives you it has less invalid failure rate, and it gives you much faster result, and you will know the quality of it. You can exercise the code, more code using API testing than the UI testing. So you should more concentrate, 85% of your test should be API, and remaining 10-15% is what you probably concentrate on UI testing. Make sure the UI bugs are captured during, your real focus should be UI bugs, not just the functionality when you're actually testing through UI, right? So that's how I see it as. Of course, use the techniques like TDD or BDD, pair programming, right? And you should be able to get the builds instantaneously. That's what we're talking about. Like, don't wait for the entire day and for you to get the build and start testing again next day. So you should be able to get the build whenever there is a check-in, whenever your bug is fixed. You should be able to get the build out of it, and then all you need to do is build that particular component and repackage the remaining parts. So you should still be able to get your build much faster. You don't need to do entire build. And then sometimes takes 2-3 hours, so you don't need to really wait for that. So build your component, package it again, you still get your build much faster than what you generally get, right?